journalist Adnan Nasser. Hi, welcome to Thora TV.
Habibi Tarek, thank you so much for letting me sit here in your home, beautiful home.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. وبدنا نحكي at freely عربي انجليزي على ريحتك. Please feel free and we can organize. هيكون عندنا هون فيسبوك هونيك يوتيوب.
Hello.
هونيك عم نصور.
The whole crowd is here. Yeah.
The whole crowd is here except Instagram لأنه عاملين عليه shadow ban. أنا I read your article about China, Iran, and USA and
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, KSA. And what's going on? It was the article. What was?
I published that article. I had written it and published it in December. That's when President Xi Jinping was concluding his trip to Saudi Arabia.
What made you think that there is a deal is working on, or why you made this article? Lots of politicians in Lebanon and in the region, nobody had a clue. Even they say sometimes the CIA didn't have an idea what's going on. This is what they say. I don't know. Under the table, above the table, but it was back in December.
December.
It was really top.
I don't profess to be a fortune teller. I can't make predictions.
You can make money here in Lebanon.
I've heard a few people they can get away with it. I'm not so sure I can. I would start off by saying journalists should never try to predict the future. They should try to give a good assessment of the situation based on facts, evidence, and talking to people of expert experience. The way I saw it was, okay, there's only two options. Either they're going to find a way to settle their differences, Iran and Saudi Arabia, or they'll have a war, in which case I don't think anyone really would win, and it wouldn't be good for the region. It's a way you could start. I think we can tell from how Russia is experiencing in Ukraine. It's very easy to start a war. It's not easy to resolve it, to finish it. You cannot stop it. Easiest thing to start a war, but it's the most difficult thing to end it the way you would like. Many factors that have to be considered.
Tell us about the article.
Well, first, it was about Xi Jinping's visit to the Arab world and how he sees the Arab world as essential to what he calls China's rejuvenation, the road to rejuvenation. He wants to make China a great power across the world. It already is in many instances, but he has to push the threshold to get to the next level that he wants to see China exist in this, what he wants, a multipolar world where there's multiple superpowers, and China is going to be one of those superpowers. The Arab world is essential to him. Not just the Arab world, but the whole Middle East. So Iran, Turkey, from their point of view, Israel come in. So he saw Saudi Arabia and Iran, both are allies of China. Both are partners of China. And he says, okay, for my country, he did this for his interest first. مصلحة لإله ومصلحة للبلد السين. I have to find a way to resolve this problem. Certainly America was not going to do it. It's sad to say, with respect to President Joe Biden, he has, I think, failed miserably when it comes to the region, with the exception of his win with Lebanon and Israel on the maritime issue. When it comes to, and he ran on that, Joe Biden. And when it comes to China, he had to do something with Saudi Arabia and Iran. And he's always had good relations with both countries. You maybe recall a few years back, Iran and China had signed a $400 billion deal, trade deal, in development and infrastructure, energy, electricity, even in military equipment to a certain degree. They have security arrangements with each other. But also he has to depend on Saudi Arabia. Why? Saudi Arabia has oil. It's the largest producer, one of the largest producers of oil in the world. And
the biggest in the GCC area.
GCC, that's right, the Gulf Cooperation. Yeah, so you cannot skip Saudi Arabia. And why would you? You don't need to and you don't want to. He also agrees with Saudi Arabia on many issues. One is Yemen. The one thing that I respect and appreciate about China is that they prioritize stability and development. They don't talk too much about political issues, talk about, you need to democratize yourself. The way America likes to play lip service to democratic reform, they talk about concrete issues, which is how do we build the roads, how do we build infrastructure, how do we increase trade, how do we actually improve the living standards of ordinary people. So they think in terms of the big picture, not the small short-term gains. So
And they look for their interest and how to make money
Yes.
and sell their products.
But we all do that to a
Yes.
certain degree. Everybody has to look out for their own interest,
Exactly.
but they do it in a way where other people, there's a mutual benefit. And China believes, to a large extent, in a win-win situation.
But we see in both countries, mainly Iran and KSA, Saudi Arabia,
Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we see two revolutions, two opposite revolutions, if you can say. One is with the development, with social development, liberation, womanization, women freedom, and we see on the other hand, killing people, aggression in schools and universities, about the hijab, what was going on. That maybe before the deal was strike, we saw lots of
violence on the streets,
and the big. So how do you see the both culture can have peace with each other, where they're two opposite culture, or they have to work on this one to at least unify the vision on the country, or they have to wait for the next generation, or what do you think about this topic?
I want to go back to something you said. You said two revolutions. I don't agree Saudi Arabia is having a revolution in the traditional sense, where there's a massive demonstrations on the street demanding change and reform. It's an evolution. It's an evolution. Saudi Arabia's leadership, whatever you say about them, like them or hate them, praise them, criticize them, they see the long road. They are thinking in terms of they're thinking in terms of modernization, evolution, in every aspect of life. In Iran, you have this extremely repressive regime still holding on to power, and you have the people of Iran suffering because of economic deterioration. Largely, I would say, due to probably domestic corruption and the mismanagement of resources. The Iranian regime is pouring billions of dollars across the region to prop up proxies, or not their allies in the region. Yemen, Syria. Cannot forget Hezbollah. They support Hezbollah. And also sanctions. I have to be honest about this. I mean, international sanctions have really taken a bite into Iran's economy. But most Iranians, I think, today are not just interested in improving their material conditions. They want social freedom. They are much more liberal in their outlook than the old guard that rules them. I think Saudi Arabia and Iran, what happened was very good. You cannot change the regime in Iran by force. You have to find a way to live with it. In some ways, you could compare it slightly to Richard Nixon's visit to China in 1976. I think it was 1976, where he went to, or 1972, I might be mistaken, 72. He visited Mao Zedong, chairman of China, the Communist Party, and Richard Nixon was vehemently against communism. He was considered a Cold Warrior, or an anti-communist during the Cold War. But he saw, okay, you have to live with them. They're not going anywhere. So you can either have this permanent status quo, where you have to deal with Iran in an aggressive, adversarial way, or you can negotiate with them, put something on the table that they can also live with. Because Iran also, don't forget, they want to be part of this region. They might want to be the top dog in this region, but they have to live with us. We have to live with Iran, and they have to live with us. So we need to find some mutual way of coexisting. I hope that answered your question. I can go more.
We're gonna just go around, talk about China a bit, about the Philippines, about Taiwan, about what's going on between the U.S. and China in the trade.
I'd like to add a caveat that I'm a knowledgeable person, but I'm not an expert.
TikTok, the way they're fighting social media as well. The states
I'm the last person to talk about social media. TikTok, I don't.
Petrodollarization, where we saw today Macron in China. We saw Germany going to China, and the petrodollar and changing to the Chinese yen might be the next header. And where do you see they have problems in China as well, and they're facing
and the whole world is going through economic change.
And the US invested heavily. They have a base in every country, the GCC and the region, and they invested heavily over the 30 years or 40 years in the region, they're gonna let this go, or there's a deal
What
done
can
on
they,
the table
what can they do?
on Taiwan, on
First of all, we still don't know. By the way, you mentioned Taiwan. You know Saudi Arabia supports China's position on Taiwan. Nobody in the U.S. seems to be condemning Saudi Arabia for taking a pro-Beijing position on Taiwan. They're not with Taipei.
yeah.
They say Taiwan is part of China. And the U.S. They're condemning Macron, because President Macron is saying we don't want to get involved in a war with China over this issue.
They lost the deal to the American, the submarine, the nuclear submarine.
You mean with
Yes.
Australia? Yeah, he's angry.
Australia.
He's
He's
bitter.
angry.
He's angry. And he has the right to be. We can bash Macron until the cows come home. And there's no one who loves doing that more than me. But I have to be blunt. I have to be honest. Macron is right to be angry at America. He's right to take a stand against America and say, look, why should we be dragged to every conflict that the U.S. seems to be getting itself into? And it's not logical. Where is our interest in doing this? And it's also an acceptance that we're living in a multipolar world already. And as some people say, if Russia wins this war in Ukraine, add this a little bit, that we're going to have a multipolar world. But we already live in a multipolar world, regardless of what happens. You think Russia is the only competitor with the United States? And it's not really a competitor, let's be blunt. It's a giant gas station with nuclear weapons. That's what Russia is. It's not an alternative.
China,
No. Russia is a gas station with nuclear weapons.
Yes.
China has a diverse economy, has development. The world depends on China to a large extent. The world depends on Russia to a certain extent, but much less than China. And China has integrated itself into the world economy in every sector you can think of. Technology, goods, social media, so TikTok, cars, they're the largest producer of electric cars, the largest user of electric cars, and they're the largest trading partner, as far as I'm aware, on almost every American ally in Asia and in the region. It's just, it's incredible how China's developed in the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, I saw a chart on recently how the economy is going to for China. It's impossible.
And this is why, and I think also, and maybe this is me reading into it, I think Xi Jinping sees some of his own domestic issues where he says, okay, so if I can solve problems around the world, bring more stability, bring more economic prosperity or economic development in trade and commerce, that can settle things back home, because it will come back to us one way or another. And don't forget, he needs stability for the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. He wants to, that's his baby, in my view. I said that is what he wants to have as his legacy. Two things, the Belt and Road Initiative, and from his point of view, the reunification with Taiwan.
Is this considered a victory for Iran in the region? What's going on with the peace that's happened in the region? Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq.
I think stability and normalization between all of us is a victory, is a collective victory.
For everybody?
For everybody, but we have to take
including Saudi Arabia?
Of course it is. Of course Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is still, first of all, we should not cut the ribbon so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We have to wait and see how this deal develops. Everyone is, we love, you know what it kind of reminds me of? When the Palestinians, the Israelis shook hands at the White House, Camp David, 1993. Mm-hmm. Yes, Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin. Everyone thought that was peace. Clinton, it was Bill Clinton. Or no, that was Oslo. Oslo Accords was Clinton's, huh?
Yes.
So they were outside the White House lawn, and they shook hands, and they thought, well, this is it. Peace is coming. We're still in the war. So we need to wait and see. I think we have to really wait and see how this develops. I think the best interpretation of this is stability is always good.
Due to the war in Europe?
What about it?
Yeah, the war that's happening in Russia and Ukraine. They need stability here to...
They need stability everywhere, Tom. China has introduced a peace plan to Russia and Ukraine. They've introduced it. But not every party involved in the war is accepting it. I will tell you this, some people are saying, why doesn't Zelensky just make concessions? I said, well, that's his business. That's his business, but how can you ask someone to make concessions when he is being occupied? Nobody asks this of anyone else around the world, I have to be honest.
Yeah, the Chinese might win or succeed where the American failed, the American
Yes,
failed.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
they will continue from there.
I mean, China, I said in this piece, China is not seeking to compete with America. There's this language of the United States and China. Yes, there's competition, but they're not trying to push the Americans out. They say, we have a role to play in the world. As the Chinese, we have a stake, we want a stake. And we want to play, we'll play by the rules, but we want to have our seat at the table. And they're not asking America to close their bases. They're not, Saudi Arabia, as far as I know, they're not asking the Americans to do that. They still need each other, Saudi Arabia and America. That relationship has been going on for a very long time, since 1945, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt met with the first king, Ibn Saud. They met on an American cruiser. Basically, that's when they signed the deal about you give us security, we'll give you oil at an affordable price. Now that part, it's still there, but if there is a genuine permanent peace, what's the use of American security arrangements? And if everyone plays by the rules, Iran, Saudi Arabia, all of us, there's no need for military bases. I'm not in favor of trading American bases for Chinese bases, Tariq. Abadan. I say we all should be working together to ensure collective security. We have a stable environment where we can have business, entrepreneurs can create jobs, create wealth for themselves, and everybody goes on with their own lives.
Do you think there is an issue with the people when we go down, not government, when we go down to the normal Saudi guys and the normal Iranian guys?
Probably not. Probably there's no problems between them. I think their problems are...
Been for decades putting hates against each other to be able to set them up and to be able to play the role there.
I think if there's peace, real peace, between our
the
countries, the governments,
there is no issue with the people.
There'll be no issues between the people, I believe. After all, Iran tries to promote itself as a Muslim power anyway. So they have no issues with the people. And for a long time, they tried to make the case that they represent the will of the people more than those local governments, because they fight for Palestine, they do all this revolutionary activities from their point of view. I say if there's a genuine peace, any differences between Saudi Arabia or Iran or Lebanese, Yemen, it's very thin, the differences, the problems. The animosities between us will vanish.
Yeah, how do you see the geo-economic situation in the region in the future, if this deal went through?
If it went through 100%, of course.
Without the American trying to stop it, or other, but I don't think so that anybody had the interest.
America initially had been endorsed, as far as I'm aware, they endorsed the deal. There was anything that brings stability.
They say we knew about it.
Okay, they knew about it. I'm sure they did, but they didn't have a hand in it. I'm sure they're bothered to a certain degree, but that's largely their fault. I mean, you remember when they had the nuclear deal with Iran? President Obama, they lifted sanctions in exchange for Iran keeping its word that it is not going to develop nuclear weapons. They allow international inspectors to come and observe their facilities, Gaza. Then Trump came along and pulled out of the deal, and Iran has been maximizing enrichment of uranium, and America reintroduced sanctions. So I would say that's partly America's fault. You made a deal, you have to keep it. You might not like the deal, but national honor, national integrity demands you keep your deals. I mean, it wasn't just an American-Iranian deal. It was an international deal that China was also involved in. So everybody, I think, is trying. The last people I think that are trying is the United States. I'm not defending Iran, I'm not defending any player when they behave badly. I'm just talking about the facts today. If you'd like me to elaborate, I can.
We want to do a special podcast on that as we to go
I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it.
Now just we're doing a small introduction for our viewers about about you. You're a journalist for the past 3 years.
Freelance journalist.
Freelance journalist covering the region and Lebanon for sure in depth, and the region, and we need this expertise in the region because it might change.
I won't use the word expert to describe myself, Abadan, sorry. But
No,
not yet.
but
not
the
yet.
focus, you're focusing
Yeah.
on.
It's a priority.
It's a priority for you.
Look, لبنان is a priority. بحب لبنان كتير من زمان بحب البلد, and it deserves more than what it's going through. يعني. But the people really need to get their act together as well. I mean, we should be all working in sync to make this country a better place, not just for ourselves, but the generations to come and the diaspora. And the diaspora has lots of potential resources and brain power, and I would consider it really a failing on my part if I didn't play some sort of role. I feel obliged.
What's your next piece on?
It's
Are
actually
you preparing anything for the next?
about the China, for lack of a better phrase, China alternative to what America had to offer the Middle East. So I'm talking about China's alternative with the GCC, this Iran deal, and basically an alternative to the security arrangements, it's diplomacy and economic development.
Thank you, Adnan, for your time, and thank you for coming here. And
Thank you, Tariq.
follow this guy. I'm gonna put his information.
Merci.
He's a great journalist. We love him, and we share his content sometime.
You're too kind, Tariq. I'm done.
And welcome to the Abadan.
Thank you.
Ciao. Bye.
Bye-bye.